Support for Veterans Corner Radio is made possible by M&M Printing and the Observer News of Ruskin, Florida.
Hello and welcome to Veterans Corner Radio Podcast's information for and about veterans. Today, host Joe Mulberger has another conversation with retired Marine Corps Colonel Bill Davis, Executive Director and CEO of Young Marines. Retired Colonel Bill Davis is back to talk about the Marine Corps' youth organization called Young Marines. Colonel Davis, who is now the organization's National Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer, talks about how the Young Marines program develops confidence and future leaders with youth ages 8 through high school age. Here now is Joe Mulberger with Veterans Corner Radio on Veterans Corner Radio Podcasts.
Welcome to Veterans Corner Radio, a show dedicated to providing information to all those who have served our country's military and to their families. Now, here is your host, combat veteran and educator, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Mulberger.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's show. You're listening to Veterans Corner Radio. I'm your host, Joe Mulberger. Today we have the National Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of an organization really chartered by the United States Marine Corps called Young Marines, the youth organization of the Marine Corps. We have with us that key individual, retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William Davis. Can I call you Bill, sir?
Absolutely, Joe.
Thank you very much. Tell us about Young Marines. How long has this organization been in existence, and really, what got it started?
Yeah, so like a lot of these things, some veterans. So 1959, Brass City, Connecticut. Probably some, World War II, Korean War veterans, got an unfiltered Camel in their hand and a PBR in the other, and looking out and said, those kids need discipline, that kind of story. But really, some local veterans got together, and that's exactly what they wanted to do. They thought that some of the young men in their neighborhood needed some kind of discipline, guidance, mentorship, fitness kind of thing, and they got it started loosely as a club. And then as it evolved into 1964, the Marine Corps League at the time, the Marine Corps League went ahead and took it on board as a chartered organization with the approval of the Marine Corps. I mean, I got an old black and white photo of these guys looking over this document, in the office here. And then in 1980, like good parents, the Marine Corps League said, hey, enough of this. You guys go do your own thing. And so in 1980, we were incorporated as a standalone 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Now, in between that 64 and 80, in 1974, we went co-ed. They added in young ladies to the program. And I always try to tell people that history is interesting because that's pretty darn progressive for Marines. We're like the service that has the smallest number of females in it. 1974 was 2 years before they allowed ladies to attend the service academies. That's how progressive these guys were, and we've been running with it ever since. To today, the organization spans across 40 states. Last year, we had around 5,000 kids in 225 locations, supported by 1,800 motivated adult volunteers, half of which are veterans. And we focus on leadership development, community service through citizenship, a lot of volunteering with veterans, and living a healthy, drug-free lifestyle. And that's kind of the fast and short of it, Joe.
Wow, there's a whole lot of depth that we can dive into with that. And I have to say, as a retired Air Force person myself, I have a deep, reverent respect for Marines. I have an uncle who served as a Marine during the Korean War. He had arrived there just after the Chosun Reservoir. And he said to me, as I was heading into the Air Force, he said, Joe, you shouldn't have gone in the Air Force. You should have joined the military. And so any time throughout my time in the military, when I had the chance to support Marines, I always overdid it intentionally, knowing that Marines just don't get all they should. And so it's no surprise to me that young Marines incorporated or included young women in the organization in 1974 ahead of so many others. And that's just a wonderful stepping forth point so that we can continue to converse. How is day one, for example, of someone that's new to young Marines? What is it that are there yellow footprints where you hold your meetings?
You
Is
know,
it a basic training type of
Joe, remember
environment?
it's a youth program. Sometimes I have to remind people of that. I retired out of the Marine Corps and I ran a JROTC school, and for a while I had to remind the instructors, "Hey, gents, they're high school students." Well, here, our program starts at age 8, and we go from 8 to high school, right? So we got the mighty mites, we got those motivated little ones all the way up to the high schoolers running the program. But it all starts the same way. We call it recruit instruction. I'm always having to remind everyone, hey guys, it's gals, it's not boot camp. Remember, we're not making Marines. We're just trying to produce good citizens. And so recruit instruction, 26 hours of instruction, and you gotta earn the title of young Marine. Hoorah! Just like everything else in life. So we go through this 26-hour process. It could be a long weekend, a week, just depends on how the units, work that out. But they go through the process, and then we do a big graduation ceremony for them, and they become formally young Marines and their uniform and everything. And then they work their way through the process from there. The recruit instruction is a little bit about history. It's a little bit about fitness, a little bit about marching. Got to have some of that in there. And then just other activities to kind of get the kids climatized. But also it's that opportunity to say, this is what I want to do, or maybe this program isn't for me, because young people should vote with their feet, do something that you like, that's going to engage you. And a lot of them, they do. They appreciate the challenge. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand about, like, for really all generations, but this generation is, if you challenge them age appropriately, skill appropriately, and you throw that challenge out there, they will rise to that challenge every time. There's a few one-offs, but maybe that's just because this isn't what they want to do. But most of the kids, they thrive on the challenge, and when you throw it at them. And so that's where you start with recruit instruction and become a basic young Marine. And if you're the honor grad, you get promoted. Hoorah, young Marine private from or private first class. So you come out young Marine private PFC, and we use just the enlisted ranks. It keeps it simple. So we use the enlisted Marine Corps ranks, if you would. We were wearing woodland camis. Those are really tough to get now. So we're going with a civilian digital. It is not the Marine Corps digital. We got to make sure that we're not wearing that uniform, because that has all kinds of historical policy ties and things to it. But the kids, they'll wear those uniforms, and they wear it with pride. I saw the same thing in JROTC. Kids will wear those uniforms for pride when they understand what it really stands for. But you earn your ranks through time and activities in the program, and certain ranks you have to go to leadership schools to earn.
That's fantastic. Now, the adults, is there a rank structure among the adults as well?
So our adult volunteers, and I really like to talk about it, because there's really no chicken or egg when it comes to a youth program. If you don't have adult volunteers, you don't have a program. You're familiar with Civil Air Patrol, same thing, and same thing for our sister program, the Sea Cadets. You got to have those motivated adult volunteers. And that's how, I guess, as it always starts. Back in the late 90s, my older son was in the Young Marines program, and you start out as a parent, next thing you know, volunteer. And a couple of years later, you're the unit commander. Yeah, because nature abhors a vacuum.
And then you're the national executive director and CEO. Bill, okay, you throttled back for the audience. You've got us all settled in. It's not basic training, but those 26 critical hours sound like they're rife with rites of passage. You talk about history and fitness and marching. It sounds like there's a lot of possibly team building events that are incorporated in all of that. So it's not a scream in the face. It's not a welcome to Gunnery Sergeant Hartman event. And I think that the audience has now tempered themselves. So give us an idea of expectation management for that 26 hours. And then we can step beyond that 26 hours into the, how does one go through the program, and what are the benefits of the program? For example, Civil Air Patrol and Sea Cadets, once you obtain a certain rank, you get points towards attending military academies. And if you go into the military, you are advanced in your rank. And And I know that the Marines specifically, they have very tough requirements. You know, not everybody graduates from, I mean, everyone that graduates Marine Corps basic training is a private, but to graduate as a PFC, I think is probably as far as you can go. But I'm an outsider looking at this. Help us walk through what this means for a young Marine.
Yeah, it's fairly similar. The Marine Corps order allows for both the young Marines and JROTC. So for JROTC, if you complete 2 years of JROTC at the completion of boot camp, if you get through boot camp, okay, you'll get promoted one rank. For the young Marines, it's earning the rank of sergeant, which takes about 2 years or longer, depending on your unit. It depends on how you pace yourself. JROTC is obviously structured at the high school level. So, boom, boom, you are going to complete this period of instruction in an orderly fashion because you are in high school. Whereas, Young Marines is an evenings and weekends program, and sometimes it takes a little longer. So the decision was that Young Marine Sergeant and above would earn the right, and it's in the Marine Corps order that you would earn the right for that additional promotion. As far as the service academies, it's good. It provides proof that you understand the nature of service, you understand the military. You probably have a little more discipline and engagement and fitness than maybe some other children would that are applying to those academies. Last year, of my 6 Division Young Marines of the Year, 1 is going to the Air Force Academy, 1 is going to the Naval Academy, 1's enlisting in the Marine Corps, another still got another year before they graduate. And that's kind of, I will output that as an outcome, I run a youth development program that happens to be Marine Corps flavored. So about 30% of the young Marines will join the services. Right now, that's what our average is. Of the 30%, just over half join the Marine Corps. It's kind of like we're givers, man. We don't take everyone. The other roughly half will join other services. Second is Army. So about 20% will go to the Army, and then roughly 13% or so, 13% each will go Air Force and Navy. And so it's kind of interesting. We get a few Coasties and a few Space Force. Space Force may pick up over time just because they're a newer service, but they have smaller, numbers. So it kind of makes sense. But I like that too because, it's about service. And Joe, you get this. My first thing to everyone is if you decide you want to serve, understand the nature of service, understand the commitment you're making. Once you get through that part, find your tribe and you get it. You got to find the place that works for you. A recruiter's job is to get you to sign a contract, just like a car salesman doesn't want you to leave the lot, right? I'm about youth development. I want you to find the place where you're going to be most productive as an American citizen. And so if you decide to serve, let's make sure you go to the place where you're going to be most productive and you're going to have the best value for you and for the service you're joining. And so I think that also reflects the fact that our volunteers, as I mentioned, about half of our volunteers are veterans, and many of them, they are Marines, but not all of them. I got a little of everything. I got one unit that is led by a retired Air Force Master Sergeant whose XO is in the Navy and whose training officer is from the Army. And the Marines were like, oh, why didn't you ask us? Well, you guys didn't sign up, but feel free to help out later if you want, buddy. But this is about kids, and it's about giving them the things that they need to be successful in life, the self-confidence, the personal discipline, the experiences, the leadership, the public speaking, all of those things that we develop in time with them, and occasionally taking them outdoors, because that's good too.
Imagine that. No sitting in front of a screen with a bunch of... So, okay, let's walk back on a couple of things because it was like, here, let me barrage you with a bunch of questions. But those adult leaders, do they wear a rank, and is there a rank system among them?
Yeah, we'll jump back into that. So for adult leaders, basically we look for people that, want to follow the program, read the rules. We do background, national background checks on all of them. We update those every 3 years just to make sure everything's good to go. And we ask for 3 letters of reference, from outside people, and then we bring them on board. They'll get some local training. We try to do regional training as best as possible, and sometimes national, depending on our funding profile for the year. So we'll do virtual. We like live training mostly. We do a little bit of virtual, but mostly live training. Like I said, locally, regionally, nationally as able. The really rank structure, at the unit level, you got unit commanders who's in charge of the unit. They have an XO, they have an adjutant, training officer, depending on how many volunteers they have and what hats they want to wear. But the bottom line is you usually have to have a unit commander, an XO, and an adjutant, and then somebody manages the money. And we make sure there's two-person integrity on that so we don't get in trouble. We are divided into 6 divisions across the country. If you go to the website, youngmarines.org, you'll see find a unit, and it'll show you a map. And the map's color-coded by those 6 divisions. And within the divisions, there are regiments. And the regiments sometimes depends on the level of intensity of the area. It could be multi-state, it could be one state. In a couple of cases, I have to have a couple of regiments in a state because there's so many units within the state that it's easier for span of control. In terms of rank, a division commander, regimental commander, it's a title. And what it really means is you've got to manage more volunteers than you do at the local level. And I always have to remind those gentlemen and ladies that take on those roles is make sure occasionally you go down and do something with the kids to remind you of why you're really doing all this and why you're trying to manage volunteers, is because at the end of the day, we're helping these kids become great citizens.
That's wonderful. Okay, so no rank structure among the adults.
No.
It's really a position and understanding that position has a value to
Right.
youth.
Yeah, they're just titles that go along with the organizational structure. I don't issue some kind of certificate. I do, we obviously look at I appoint the division commanders based on interviews. I allow them, they pick an assistant division commander that we agree upon, good people that can run the show. And then I allow the division commanders to pick their regimental leaders because, they have to work with their team in their area.
So the youth, you had mentioned that sergeant was the sort of the stepping off point for if a person's going to go in the military and it takes a couple of years to get there. How far does the rank structure of the youth program go? Like,
Sure.
Is there a master guns running around?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, there is.
Oh, man.
So we basically we use the enlisted rank structure. So you're a recruit in training, and then you promote to private, and then you go all the way up to sergeant major or master gunny. So young Marine sergeant major, young Marine master gunny, and the sergeant major, the young Marine first sergeant and young Marine sergeant major ranks are associated with billets. So the young Marine first sergeant would be for an area or an event. If we have the billet that's associated with that, and then the young Marine sergeant major usually is associated with whether it's a camp or a major event, but also the divisions. Every year we do a competition. So you'll have the Young Marine of the Year at your unit. You will have the junior and senior Young Marines of the Year at the regiment. And at the division, you have the Young Marine of the Year. That Young Marine of the Year at the division level will be billeted as a sergeant major, as opposed to someone that goes through the ranks but doesn't become the Young Marine of the Year. There's still an opportunity for them to achieve that Young Marine Master Gunnery Sergeant rank, which is still, good stuff too. There's only one Sergeant Major for each division, and then we pick annually from those 6 division Sergeant Majors who are all competitively selected through promotions. Then we will pick a National Young Marine of the Year, and then they usually will travel with me to a few of our bigger events to represent the program and such.
Wow. Okay. So we've got uniforms, we've got locations, we've got travel. Who's paying for all of this?
So combination, it's about 60-40. So we were beneficiaries of a federal grant back in the 90s. If you remember when General McCaffrey took over as the drug czar in the Clinton administration, and he said one of his directives was, hey, we need some youth prevention programs. The military should have these. And so each of the services chose a program, and the Young Marines happen to be the Marine Corps version of that. And we've stayed on mission ever since. Now, in 2008, in the sequestration, we got booted out of the POM, so we're no longer in the Marine Corps budget. But Congress picked us back up in FY10 as a federal grant recipient. And so we were given funds to continue with the leadership development, youth development, drug prevention aspects of the program. And some people really looked at that and said, how you help prevent a child from going into drugs. Drug prevention or drug demand reduction education is if you give them the resiliency, you give them the education, you give them the support, what they call protective and developmental factors for my psychology friends, those things will produce a resilient child who doesn't feel the need to do drugs because they already are living that good lifestyle. So we just reinforce that with our messaging, which kind of that drug demand reduction piece, that drug prevention piece, depending on what background you have in this arena, that is why the second biggest cohort of job outcomes for our program is first responders. Because of that drug demand reduction component, because kids are being exposed to EMTs and firefighters and police officers and DEA agents and doctors and nurses and stuff, they really get to see these other job opportunities that a lot of kids don't have that engagement. They're seeing a lot of military from the veterans and the things that we do in the program, but then they see these first responders, and that's why you see a lot of kids will go down that path. And the last big component, teachers. A lot of young Marines will go into teaching because we expect as a young Marine progresses through the program and gets older, we teach the classes when they're younger, and then we expect, you start getting a little older. Hey there, young Marine sergeant, staff sergeant, platoon sergeant, whatever. It's your turn to teach this class on drill to the kids, and your turn. Or you're the ones helping us cadre a recruit instruction program, and they get that teaching bug. I hear them tell me that all the time. I really enjoyed watching someone learn. And I really got a kick out of watching some kid learn from me. I want to be a teacher. All valued professions for our society. So we're happy with the outcomes.
Absolutely phenomenal. Oh my gosh. So let's go back to that initial 26 hours. What are some, and not to give away trade secrets, but what can a new person into that 26 hours expect from, say, a team building event?
Yeah. So the recruit instruction, there'll be a little bit of that, but really there'll be, we do the PFT. Interesting that they just announced, we're bringing the presidential fitness test back. Funny enough, we've been using the same presidential fitness test for years. I actually had reached out to the folks, several years I've been reaching out like, hey, what's the new one? Are you going to change it? And they've just finally announced, that we're sticking with this, and that's the one we're already using. So I don't have to change anything. I'm excited about that. We'll do fitness, we'll do drill. They'll learn about, how to form up for different activities. They'll learn a little bit of that structure that you would expect in the military. We don't just gaggle around. When it's time to go to the bathroom, we line up. When it's time to go to eat, we line up. We march there, we march back. The classes are on basic history and terminology. And then we'll start getting into some first aid and some fire safety. Some of the earlier classes we do are associated with those kinds of activities, just really basic things like that we do. Uniform wear, saluting, how to engage with people correctly. So that's a lot of what you're going to see. Depending on if it's the days, you'll probably start, every day is going to start with PT, physical training, hoorah. There'll be a little of that. There'll be a little drill. Then there'll be some class time. We talk a little bit about our drug prevention messaging and about health and fitness. So it's just kind of a little cornucopia of everything we think that should get you an idea of what this program is about. And hopefully that gets you hungry for more, and that you graduate, become a young Marine, and go on to do the rest.
That's really nice, especially with the drill and ceremonies as a fundamental something is an early stepping point of team building. And it's nice to know that people have to understand their individual portion in the overall team.
Well, it's funny because we talk about drill, and okay, I'm a Marine, and my dirty secret, I was not like the big drill guy. I mean, we do it. Marines, you're doing drill, by gosh. We're all doing drill, and you're going to be pretty darn good at it just because you don't want to stand out from the crowd. Not my favorite thing, but the kids really like it. And as a leadership development program, I'll go back to this. It's a fundamental thing. When you do drill, and it's hard to do because we're talking about it on a screen, and it's all audio right now for folks. But when you imagine you're with a group of 5 or 6 kids, right? And one kid's out in front, and you're marching along, and that kid on the side's going left, right, left, right, left, right. And you're just shuffling along, left, right, left, right. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, Susie Jones or Johnny Jones, your turn. They're like, oh, and you pull them out, and they go left, right, left, right, left, right. And all the other kids are doing left, right. 2 things happen. 1, you had to speak in front of your peers. 2, you gave an order and people followed it. And it is your first, sometimes for some kids, their first taste of some kind of leadership and public speaking role. And it clicks, and it's so subtle. It's so easy. You don't even think about it. And all of a sudden, like, well, you spoke in public before. What do you mean, sir? You were calling cadence, weren't you? Yeah, you were talking in public. And so that becomes that one of those fundamental building blocks that we'll go from drill and ceremony and calling cadence to we expect you to give a class, public speaking, and then from that class we expect you to teach a class. It's those building blocks that builds that self-confidence a little bit at a time, age appropriate, skill appropriate, building that self-confidence as we go.
Wow. Here on Veterans Corner Radio, we say our veterans are worth their value in gold. Obviously, you are a retired United States Marine Corps colonel. You absolutely not only meet but exceed that standard. Today, we've been speaking with none other than the Young Marines National Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer, retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William Davis. Bill, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for all that you're doing for the future of America with our young Marines.
Thanks so much, Joe. Just trying to be one more piece of the gold standard out there for you. Remember, youngmarines.org. Hoorah.
Outstanding.
You've been listening to Veterans Corner Radio with your host, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Mulberger. The views expressed on this program are those of Joe and his guests and are opinions based on the best available information. In matters of law or governmental regulation, it will always be best to check with the appropriate agency. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us for the next program on Veterans Corner Radio.
Here's a quick final thought. If you're enjoying these podcasts, why not take a minute to subscribe or mark Veterans Corner Radio as a favorite? It's easy, and you'll be set to be among the first to find out when new podcasts are published. And thanks again for listening to Veterans Corner Radio.